So your annual oil change is probably the most important job you need to do on your motorbike. No matter what your miles, every year you should really be changing the oil. If you go to an official Triumph dealer, they're usually charging about £180 for a standard small service. So when you actually look at the physical work that they do, the only real piece of mechanical work is the oil change. The rest of it will be things like checking your throttle cable, the clutch cable, brake wear and things like that. And those are all tasks which I'm fairly happy to do myself, and probably need doing more than once per year. So something you should really be keeping an eye on anyway. So being able to do this yourself will save you a fair chunk of cash. So let's take a look at the tools we need to do this. So in order to do this job, you're going to need some consumables and some basic mechanical tools. So first of all, you're going to need some oil. So I've got some Castrol Power One Racing 10W40. So this one they claim is recommended by Triumph, but on the whole I'll just get whatever's on offer from one of the known brands. So whatever their top oil is, I'll generally get that one. So this cost me about, I think, £35. You normally get it between 30 and 40 depending on what offer you find. So this is 4 litres, so slightly more than I'll actually need. So I wouldn't quite do 2 services with that, but maybe 1.5. So that's the oil. The other consumable you're going to need is an oil filter. So I generally use these K&N oil filters, and the main reason I use these ones is this riveted nut on the top. So it's got a 17mm nut, which means it's a lot easier to take out and put back on. So they can get quite tight, and there's actually not very much room underneath the speed triple in order to get a hand round or a ratchet strap or something like that. The other advantage of the nut is you can actually use a torque wrench to put it onto the correct torque. So I'll normally use a low range torque wrench, bit of a luxury, but I can set this to 10 Newton meters and put it onto the correct torque. Yeah. So that's the oil filter. So also your sump plug is going to have a small washer on it, and they're called a crush washer. So this one's made out of copper, and the idea is that when the nut is torqued up, that will slightly deform and just give it a bit more seal. So copper's obviously a little bit softer than the steel. So it's advisable to change those. I have heard of a lot of people just using the old one. They look pretty much the same when you take them off, but it's best practice to change that. And they're pretty cheap as well, so just buy a pack of 10 or something. And it won't be very much cash. The other thing you're going to need is a 13mm either spanner or socket. So I'll probably use it both, but I've got a 13mm spanner here to get the sump plug off, and also a 13mm socket. So either of these are going to work just as well as the other. The advantage with the socket is it's also going to fit onto a torque wrench. So ideally you'll be using a torque wrench to refit this back to 25 Newton meters. So look at the dealer manual or Haynes manual or something like that, and it'll tell you what the torque settings are for your bike. So I would recommend using one of these. Some people will think that they're just for setting a minimum level of torque, but that's not really the case. If you over tighten it and overstretch the bolt, that can be just as bad as under tightening it. So yeah, recommend using a torque wrench. 25 Newton meters on mine, and so I'll also be using a 17mm socket, because that's what fits onto the end of the oil filter to allow me to tighten it and remove it. You're also going to need some sort of a pan to put underneath the bike to catch the dirty oil when it drains out of it. I've got an oil drip pan with a spout on it. You could use an old wok or saucepan, milk bottle, whatever you want. Just make sure you dispose of it correctly afterwards. And that's all you need. So let's go and do the job. So before draining the oil, I like to heat it up. So I'll just run the engine normally until the fan comes on, turn it off for 10-15 minutes, just to get a little bit of heat into that oil, to make it a little bit less viscous. It's quite a cold day today, that'll make it drain out a bit easier. So let's do that. Make sure you're in a well ventilated area. Okay, that's all heated up now, so now we let it cool down a little bit and come back and do the oil. Okay, so I've let the bike cool down a little bit now. So if we look closely down here, you'll see that the oil sump plug is just here. So that's what we're going to be undoing. First of all, get the drip pan underneath, so hopefully you can see that. You might want to consider getting a pair of rubber gloves on, as you don't really want to get engine oil over your hands. It can be carcinogenic. Not quite sure what this is, but it's just fallen off the bike, so we'll take a look at that later. Get your 13mm spanner. So the oil will still be quite hot at the moment, so I wouldn't recommend getting your hand under and taking it straight off, otherwise the oil will come straight into your hand. So what I usually do is try to catch it with the spanner. So it takes a little while to get it off, but if possible, just prevent the nut from falling into the oil. Doesn't really matter if it happens. Okay, so the oil's starting to come down the threads now. And there we have it, so managed to catch the nut this time. So even with being careful, it still went over my hand, so the gloves came into play there. So you can see it's starting to drip out, or pour out. And you'll notice that the sump plug is over to the rear left-hand side of the sump. So it drains out best. It's designed to drain out best when it's on this side stand, even though if you put it onto a centre stand or an ABBA stand or whatever, or paddock stand, and it'll be a bit easy to access under here. You'll have a bit more clearance, but it won't actually drain out quite as easy as if it's on its side stand. So I've tried both, and the side stand works best. So give that plenty of time to trickle out. The bulk of it will come out within about 30 seconds, but then it will continue to drain a little bit. I'm just going around to the other side of the bike. You'll notice that I've loosened the filler cap just to let a bit of air in there, so that just lets it drain out a little bit quicker. Okay, so 2 or 3 minutes later, that's pretty much there now. Just a few drips coming out, so we need to go to the other side of the bike to access the oil filter. Some plug's been removed, and we just need to remove the oil filter. So if you've got the K&N, you'll just need your 17mm spanner. So this is the view underneath the bike. Oil sump still dripping just a little bit, and here's an oil filter. So with that nut, you can see you can get it quite a lot easier. You can get your spanner straight onto it, whereas if you're trying to get a strap around it, you'd be having quite a lot of difficulty getting there, because it's not a particularly good design. Even to grab it and tighten it by hand, it would be quite tricky. So so get under there, undo that, make sure the oil pan's underneath as well, because when you unleash this, it will drip a whole bunch more oil onto it. Be careful of the exhaust and the sump, as they still might be a little bit hot. Now, unless you're really in a hurry, it's best just to leave this for a few minutes just to drip out all of the oil. Otherwise it's a bit of a pain and you're getting it all over yourself when you're trying to refit it. So if you're not in a hurry, give the local area a bit of a wipe down with a rag, let all the oil come out, and then move on to the refitting. So while that oil is draining, it's a good opportunity to check out your sump plug, just to make sure that's in good condition. So what I generally do, so there's your crush washer. It's actually not bad condition in this case, but I'm still going to replace it anyway. So I'll put that one to the side. So what I'll normally do is just use some generic degreaser. Give it a clean up. So there's quite a long thread on this, and you'll notice when you're taking it out, you've got to unscrew it quite a long way before it will actually start to leak oil anyway. But even so, it's good practice to just check this face where the washer sits on, because if that's severely damaged or these threads are damaged, you might want to consider getting a new one of those. This is still the original. That's a 2005 bike, so it's unlikely, but just in case. So that's pretty good condition. So we'll get the new washer onto it and go and refit it. So after 5 or 10 minutes, should have stopped dripping oil. What I'll usually do is just slide a bit of cardboard underneath when I take the drip pan out anyway, just in case there are a few stray drips. So a delicious bowl of oil. You'll need some sort of a receptacle to dispose of this. I tend to just use an old oil can and a funnel. Okay, so you can see I've spilt a little bit there already, despite the funnel. So you can see even with this drip pan, it's still made quite a mess. So if you're buying one, try and get one with a decent spout, because this one's rubbish. So anyway, we'll clear that one up and start the refit. So to refit the sump plug and the oil and the new oil filter, we're going to need a 13mm socket to refit the sump plug. We're also going to need our torque wrench. So set this to 25 Newton meters or whatever your manual tells you to set your sump plug to. And for myself, I'm also going to need a 17mm socket and a lower range torque wrench to set that to 10 Newton meters. So before fitting our filter, what you want to do is just make sure that this O-ring is in good condition, and also take a look underneath the bike. I can't get the camera under there very easily. Just to check the surface to make sure there's no corrosion or pitting or even just dirt on it, which might prevent that from sealing. Is just fill that one up with fresh oil, just roughly to the top, and just put a smear of oil around the seal before you fit it. Just put a smear around there. Okay, so get your nice new oil filter filled with fresh oil. Just fit it underneath the bike. Make sure you don't cross thread it. It is a little bit awkward. Okay, so that's on there now. And if you're in the luxurious position of having a torque wrench with a 10 Newton meter setting on it, set that one up. That's not a lot of torque there, so if you are doing it by hand, don't over tighten it, otherwise you'll end up pushing the seals out and it won't actually seal properly. So we've got our sump plug now that we're going to refit. We've got a nice new crush washer on it, copper washer, and we've got a 13mm socket. Just again, make sure that the sealing surfaces are clean underneath the bike. Refit that. Okay. Okay, so hopefully if you're attempting this job, you know how to check the oil and how to refill it, but we'll show you anyway. So you just unscrew the oil filler cap. Make sure your O-ring is in good condition. These can perish a little bit and sometimes they need replacing. This one's okay. And there's some markers on here where you need to fill it to. So remember, when you're actually checking the oil on the speed triple, the bike needs to be upright. So if you fill it to this mark while it's on this side stand, you'll end up overfilling it. So if you're filling after an oil change, it's best to go a little bit slowly rather than quickly, because it's a lot easier to put a bit more oil in than take it out, and it does take a little while just to drain down the engine into the sump. So go slowly, put a little bit in there, and check the reading intermittently. So you'll just need a funnel. Check the markings on the side of the bottle. You can see roughly how much you've put in, so you can keep track. So the full capacity of this bike is 3.2 litres, including what you've put into the oil filter. So this bottle will do you, well, one fill, and you'll have probably half a litre, 1 litre left over, depending on how thorough the drain was. So while you're refilling, it is a good idea just to take a glance under the bike as well, and also after you've run it for the first time, just to make sure nothing's leaking out. If you're confident in your work, it shouldn't really be an issue, but it's good to check anyway. So that's all there is to changing the oil on a speed triple or most other motorbikes. So if you've got all the tools there ready and all the equipment, that'll probably take you less than an hour, even including starting up the bike, letting it cool down and things like that. It would take me longer than that to take the motorbike into a garage, wait for them to do it, and then drive back and pick up the bike again. And the total saving is around about the £150 mark. So depending on your local dealers and what oil you use and things like that, it's still quite a significant saving. So it's a job I'd recommend learning to do.